spend too much time on that. I kind of want to just skip past this at this point, but does anybody want to get into that piece at all before I move on to maps?
I have lots of questions. Lisa, is it okay if I ask, or do you want me to?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So, Jonathan, I don't know that the detail is necessarily what this group needs to be thinking about right now.
No.
My questions are more about, what does this look like?
Yep.
Why are we looking at school property primarily for this? How does it impact the district? What kinds of extra concerns will it add to the district? What kinds of protections will we have? I just have a lot of those types of questions. I know that it looks like we have a lot of land, but all of that land is used year round. So how does it impact that to start with?
Yeah, so good questions. That's part of why I didn't want to spend a lot of time on those numbers. Also, because I'm on the same page. So the I don't have those already open right now. I can, but I just don't want to get too clunky in terms of pulling up maps, a lot of different versions of the maps. But we've looked, so in each village, we looked at potential sites where the soil conditions are well suited for an in-ground wastewater disposal system. Pieces of land that aren't broken up into smaller parcels, and that aren't too far from, or preferably even within the village centers. As those are probably the main factors of the different properties we've looked at. On this particular scenario that I've got on the screen, this was one where we looked at sending all the wastewater north of Jericho Center, but we've also looked at potential disposal sites around the village center on some of the larger lots, like here where the computer hand is, and here, and then a couple of potential sites here at the south end and here. And we've gone through parcel by parcel with the soil mapping and all of the conditions that you need to look at for what would keep you from having a leach field on a site. So you can't have a leach field that's too close to a well. You can't have it too close to a wetland, steep slopes, greater than 30% slope. There are a bunch of factors like that, property lines. There's setbacks from all of those to site a leach field, on a much smaller scale in people's homes. And so we looked at that on a larger scale for all of the villages. It's not by any plan that all of the school sites end up with some potentially favorable soils, and potentially larger area that you could put a leach field in compared to some others around the community. But there are other options. And all of that's in our 30% report, which we could share that whole report so that people could kind of see the background. I feel like it might take longer than you want tonight if I really went into all of that detail. Go ahead.
Maybe I can ask my question a little bit more directly, or smaller scale.
Yep.
For example, at Mount Mansfield, the only land that's there that's not used for fields is right in front of the school, between the parking lot and the road.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the land that you're thinking of? Are you thinking that this would go under sports fields? I understand what a leach field is. I don't understand what a municipal wastewater system collection site is and how that would impact the schools and the land at the school.
Yep. Good question. So, well, so the yellow boxes are not any, we have not, this is a very preliminary stage of the study. So as an overall, these would be just larger than the leach fields you would have at your home. Same type of construction, 4-foot wide trenches that have stone and pipe in them that take the wastewater and allow it to percolate into the ground. They just are larger inside in area than for a single family home or small subdivision. A lot of community wastewater systems around the state are beneath athletic fields at schools. Town of Rochester has some. Town of Jericho has some, or the schools have some. You have existing leach fields that there's a leach field system here at Mount Mansfield High School. Zoom in a little bit. At this scale, these are the drawings of the leach fields that are there, a little cartoony looking. I have the permit plans that I could open to if you wanted to see them in a little more detail, but these are the locations at the elementary school. So there are activities and things going on over the current leach fields right now, and this would be similar, just at a larger scale. So these would be, in terms of the impacts to a school, these would be things that would need to be built over the summer when school is not in session. That all could easily be done. They're traditional construction that happens all the time around the state, digging trenches, filling them with stone and pipe, and then connecting to a pump station that pushes the wastewater out into the field evenly. And some other people have asked, raised hands. I'm not.
Let's start
I'll stop for a second.
okay. Let's start with Diane.
Thanks. I guess, the bottom line is, why are you coming here now? What is the ask for tonight? This is a really big discussion subject. It encompasses a lot of things with a lot of questions. It won't be answered by this small committee anyway. So I'm a little confused as to what you hope to achieve tonight. And you will have to really be clear as to whether the school property is being used for leach fields or for, as we've said, is the confusing part is the full wastewater treatment.
Yeah, I think Linda summarized a little bit at the beginning that we're not looking to make any decisions about anything tonight other than share the information that's that we've been looking at in the studies, and we even if you were a homeowner that has, or a private landowner, we wanted to have discussions with any landowners whose property is showing up in the study as a potential. There's an area of potential size that could support a community system. We don't want that to. We wanted to talk with any potential homeowners, landowners, and the school in this case before issuing our 60% report that shows these on a map. For one thing, we want to share the information of what's in these studies, get you a little bit of familiarity with it, and then we're looking for any feedback on whether willing to continue discussions as we move through the feasibility study. Longer term, after this would be, this study is completed, there would be a preliminary engineering report developed if the town decides to move on with any of the alternatives that are in the report. And in that preliminary engineering report, which is farther out, is when they would be saying what their preferred alternatives were for the for community wastewater systems in any of the villages. And it still just means that that's the town's preferred alternative, but it's quite a ways off before any decision making would need to happen. But it's helpful to be able to say in a feasibility study whether any landowners are definitely not willing to consider participating, because then we don't keep comparing them to other options. Hopefully that's a helpful summary. Gets at the question. And Kevin's got a hand raised. So.
Kevin?
Oh, and he took it off.
Get the right button there. Okay. No, I appreciate you guys coming, and I think we're used to every once in a while, John will bring something up, not necessarily as a decision point, but more just what's your initial feedback, and that's helpful to figure out next steps. I'm just realizing that based on the questions between Diane and Edie, I think I might have been the only one who was part of the first discussion I talked about. And obviously as a committee, we haven't had time to talk about this, so I'll just share my personal feedback. I think that this overall initiative is aligned with where I would, what I think is good for the school district. I think anything that we can do to help bring in more students, I don't say anything, but we're always looking for creative ways to fill up our buildings. So this will also fill up our fields, I guess, but you know what I mean, students. So that's one, I think high level, I would expect there to be alignment. We are a district of 5 towns, so I was really happy to hear that you're having discussions with our neighboring communities, Underhill and the firing range, which is a neighbor of ours. So I think that really resonated with me that you brought that up. The third point I would, bring to the, I guess, the Finance Committee and you as well is we don't we don't know what we don't know about our buildings right now with respect to PCBs and asbestos and other things like that. And there's a lot of uncertainty there. And if we were to commit usable land with that going on right now, it would limit our potential for options down the road. Again, unknown unknowns, but if we constrain ourselves more without having those knowns, I think it just limits our options in the future. And then the fourth one just came to me, which is around stormwater runoff at our schools. We have a lot of hard surface, and that came up at Browns River discussions last time around we would want to make sure that we comply with whatever state regulations are with respect to stormwater runoff as part of this project, I would think, if we decided to move forward.
So let me jump in for just a couple of minutes here. So Linda and John and Todd Adat, approached me about some of this information, and that the town wanted to make sure essentially that the school district was okay with them being mentioned in these plans. I guess that's the Reader's Digest version of what I took from it. I didn't feel like I could make that decision. And, our process is the first step is for, any group to start here with the facilities and the finance committee. So that's hopefully that's helpful.
I took a note that I didn't answer the question about a wastewater treatment facility. Was one part of the question earlier, and the location. So these are leach fields that are, just a lot like homeowners' leach fields, just at a larger scale. There is treatment that's needed, and the location of where that treatment happens is flexible. It doesn't have to be at the disposal site. I am the son of a teacher, and I'm married to a teacher, and if there was a treatment facility at one of these, I'm also an engineer, and I'd love to have the chance to have, if there was a treatment facility to be, if they were to be at the school facility, I would love to make it part of a curriculum that people get exposed to what's going on there, and get to learn about a little bit of STEM through an applied thing right there at the facility. So same thing with if stormwater is part of, integrated into this, which just to go back to that with Kevin, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund does also fund stormwater improvements, and so that probably could be wrapped into part of a project cost if there was a need for stormwater treatment at the schools.
So John, we're in the middle of, we've already had our stormwater plans. We've had some
Okay.
approved, and we've also submitted some permits. There's a timeline, and right now you might not be aware of this, but the earlier you get in there, there's a higher potential of a 90-10 split and being able to construct these stormwater sites. So we're really in the absolute midst of that process.
Okay. Yeah, they must be all 3-acre sites.
Diane?
Yeah, thank you, John, for summarizing that. The big decision point is that, are we okay with being mentioned in the study? I think that that's something that is a lot easier to wrap certainly my head around. And thank you also to Kevin. Yes, I was part of the original discussions. And yes, my big concern was what was the runoff and the impacts on places like the Browns River going to be from something like this. But you raised a really, really, really good point about the PCBs and the potential for needing to use our land for other things. So I'm much more clear now about what we might be needing to do at this particular time. And I think all of the details will have to come out later on in terms of the projects.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I don't know. Does anybody have any objections to being mentioned in the study, I guess?
I guess for me, as long as it's just very clear that, preliminary stages, no decisions have been made. This is one option for how we would make this happen. That this is not a, very, very clear, like this doesn't bind anybody into any final. I think that would all be very important for me.
You might want to make a motion so that it is recorded correctly.
Okay. Can I have a motion to, yes, to at least tentatively okay us being in the report as an early preliminary non-binding mention?
I mean, I'll make.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I make a motion. Do I have to repeat
Okay.
all of that?
Right. Can I get a second?
Yeah, I will second the motion that that the facilities committee Facilities and Finance Committee has, finds it acceptable to be mentioned as one of the potential sites in this study. That the school district is okay with that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Diane?
Yeah, aye, hand.
Okay. All right. Any nays? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay. The motion passes. Thank you for coming and explaining all of this.
Yeah, thanks for your time. If, as we move through the report, if there are more chances to give you updates on the report and you're interested and open to doing that, we'll take advantage of doing that to keep you up to speed with where we are in the report. We'll be having public meetings also, but happy to have additional ones with this group.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa, if I could just add, if it does come to a point where you need the district to make a decision, just make sure it's well in advance of when that decision is needed. I think, we would have to decide who's going to make that decision, if it's the board or the district or something like that, and getting a 5-town district to make a decision takes a fair amount of time. If we go down that path, I don't know if we would or not. So, come early, I guess, is my advice.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. And now we turn to budgeting.
All right, thanks. I'll sign off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So who's going to kick off the budget targets for FY25?
Nicole, do you mind if I take this?
Sure, and then I'll
So-
do the Act 27.
Yep. So we're trying to plan for FY25, which includes the impact of Act 127. So hopefully you can link to this is a draft for discussion purposes, but I'm happy to present it too. If you give me 1 second. Everybody see that? Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, we crafted this to really to emphasize the need to make sure that there are increases in per pupil education spending don't result in a higher than a 5% cap in the tax rate. So, if that were to happen, it was identified as excess spending, then we would have the tax rate, if it was going up 20%, then that's what would be applied. And that's based on the law. So that's the genesis for this. And then I put my bumper sticker at the bottom, just talking about some of the salient pieces of Act 27. The other part of this that I think is important is it's another way for us to communicate with the community about the impact of Act 127 and some of the pieces of law that are going to drive the budgets in the future. That's a little background. What do people think?
It's going to be hard, isn't it?
So, Just
Yep.
before I tell you what I think, to make sure I understand. So, and I'm sorry because I'm reading it for the first time on my little tiny phone here, but are you saying that the district's target for the budget is to stay within the 5%, like no higher than a 5% increase?
Yeah, not have our spending result in what I'm going to call a penalty for Act 127.
Okay, so don't cross the threshold. Meaning, give the, be careful what I say, but give the state what they're asking.
Yeah, and be really careful about, cautious about what's in the budget, and being able to justify really anything in there that is not in the control of the school district. Because the penalty would be quite significant. Our plan is to go out and do a needs-based budget, which we've done for the last several years, and then make sure that it's responsible and reasonable and something that the community can support. But now more than ever, we got to make sure that we do not, that we are not penalized in any way by budget decisions. Because if we are going to be subject to the committee, because our ed spending per equalized pupil is going to be over 10%, because we're losing, over 360 equalized pupils. So we're going to have to make sure that we can really justify, everything in the budget to this committee. And we need to be really careful as we're budgeting that we are doing that.
Oh, okay.
Because what will happen, Kevin, if this committee says excess ed spending, this or that shouldn't be in there, then they will apply that if it's 15%, that's where our tax rate will go up.
Okay, so I did misunderstand it. So you're not saying keep the increase below 5%. You're saying everything that's over 5%, we need to make sure is justified. That won't result in a penalty.
Yeah, essentially, yes. The what's in our budget is that we can justify that it is not excess per pupil education spending. That's something we've never had to do before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how will we know what excessive increases are?
That's supposed to be my question.
Well, we haven't gotten that criteria yet.
We'll know when we have the conversation with the Secretary of Education.
Right now, and
Okay.
I've talked to Nicole about this a lot, and I've been, using our association too to try to figure it out, but we don't know what that criteria will be. So this will be a very different budget process.
So if we make the assumption, sorry, Kevin, I'm going to jump in, but if we make the assumption that we're going to get information from the Agency of Education at the pace that we have been getting information from them, which is after the information is due, is this a reasonable target, right? I understand what you're trying to do. I don't want so much spinning happening that is this the right thing? Is this the right thing? Are they going to penalize us for it? I really want us to make sure that we're putting a budget together that will allow us to educate our students. And I think that needs to be the focus more than, because if we are doing that, we can justify it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That is definitely always the goal. This is just a very, very new twist that we want to make sure that we do not, that we're not subject to a penalty. So I was trying to, we were trying to incorporate that into the target so that doesn't happen.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I think this is maybe one of the targets or goals, but I agree with Edie that it shouldn't be the only. I think we can still look at total budget and total cost per student, not ed spending per equalized pupil, but those, you know, factors that are uninfluenced by state formulas to try to also give some guidance around our budget without being fully dependent on a uncertain target.
Well, then I would recommend that we focus on overall budget and ed spending, but not ed spending per equalized pupil. And you know, the targets I would set would be 6% for the overall budget, less than or equal to 6%, and ed spending 6.5% increase. That would be our recommendation. Nicole and I have talked about this.
Mhm.
It's not gonna, is that enough? That's always my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good target. The ed spending mirrors what our settlement increase is, which you know, is a significant driver. And we do, when we get to the 5-year forecast, that aligns with, you know, what we have in there as well.
I'm not sure who raised their hand first. Edie, we'll go alphabetically.
Thanks. Yeah, Kevin's might have just been up from before, but I guess I had the same question that Lisa did, is like, what's the basis for those numbers? I mean, it's based in our contract that we have negotiated, that we know that those are the increased costs. We roughly know how inflation is impacting other purchases, although they are a much smaller piece of the budget, right? Everything is less than the cost of our staff. I can support that. And I really prefer to have those types of goals and targets rather than some nebulous thought that somebody may or may not ever give us data about.
Okay. I wish I wouldn't have spent any time on this. But we can certainly come up with the targets that in a similar format to what we did before. But ed spending per equalized pupil would, I mean, it's going to be over 10%.
Mhm.
And that's the purpose of the cap. So
Well,
we can.
it is good to keep this in mind in case a left curve or a curveball comes in.
So
Can I make one other recommendation?
sure.
Mhm.
Is that we do something that is ed spending per pupil, like based on how we've been doing it, that we track that all along so we can show taxpayers how much this increase is based on our actual spending and how much it is based on the state's change of how they're funding pupils, right? Because I think that we're not losing 360 pupils. And I think we need to be very clear with our towns that this is what we've been talking about. This is what we've been concerned about. And the way that our funding is changing has, you know, is not what is changing the money that we're spending, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that very clearly, but, you know, we still have to spend the money to educate the same number of pupils, whether we get that money from the state or not. And I think that's really important for folks to know.
Mhm.
We can definitely model that because we have to a certain extent now. So we'll make sure in any budget presentation that that's in there.
And I think the tax rate impact, the 127 modeling that we're going to look at next, will make that a bit clearer for this group, and we can sort of model something off of that for the budget presentation too.
Okay. Kevin?
Oh, yeah, I agree with Edie, but would, you know, say that explaining the reason might help with some people, but at the end of the day, the change is what it is. And I think most people will make their decision based on that. So we have to be clear what the impact, as we work through it, we have the numbers and we realize what the anticipated tax rate change is going to be. We have to lead with that and then, get into what's driving it and let the voters decide.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So where did we land? Are we gonna, John? Are we gonna keep the target that you have on the screen and add to it, or did you hear from us guidance to kind of scrap that and just focus on what's in our control?
Well, this is in our control too. I think we need a, how we spend our per pupil spending per pupil is in our control. So, I'll do, either scrap this, keep it in the back of our mind, or add it to those 2 additional targets. Whatever is the will of the committee.
I would vote to keep it in the back of our mind for right now, since we don't have any guidance from the state, and focus on something that's more concrete and known. I don't know if other people have different thoughts.
Buttons are too small on my phone. I'd like to, on the target sheet, I'd like to see the 2 or 3 metrics that we've been using in the past that show, like I said, total budget or cost per pupil, things that would be easy to measure, not influenced by this. But I think the bumper sticker or, an additional target around this particular driver should also be something that we are considering as we work on the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and I fall more into Lisa's camp, which is, I don't know that this needs to be one of the targets, but it absolutely needs to be something in our mind as we're developing the budget, because, first of all, it will be, it always is, right? We're always making sure we're incredibly careful about how we spend money in this district. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of like an approach or methodology as opposed to a target.
I guess I would just want to know if this is going to be the best way to help John develop the budget. What's going to help him the most? Because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of twists and turns along the way, and we're going to come back to the discussion. We may have to change tactic. So I'm just thinking that, John, whatever's going to give you the best guidance to move forward in starting this whole budget thing would be my best choice on that.
Yeah, I think I can come up with those concrete. We talked about the ones that I would add, or we would add, because they are easy for people to understand. And we had talked about them today in the event that the committee wanted to add some additional targets. But I think it's fine to use the bumper sticker that we have here, and then have those 2 other targets, and just make sure that this is something that we are following very, very closely. And what Diane said, I think, is important. We may have to come back to this and reorganize and really replan what we're doing in the middle of the budget process. So we can do, we will put something together in the next, week or so and send it to into the committee. Is that okay?
That sounds good.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
Okay, Nicole, you're going to go over 5-year?
Yep. John, if you want to stop sharing, I will share the, I will share the.
And have a safe flight, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm going to sign off. Sorry,
Take
I missed
care.
the 5-year.
Bye.
I'll watch the video when I get home.
Riveting.
Bye, guys.
I know it's a lot here and it's kind of small, but is this okay for folks? Oh, that's too much.
You can also link right to it on your computer.
Okay. So let's focus on this top section here, labeled scenario 1. So what you're seeing, sorry, what you're seeing here is the calculation of how we determine the tax rate every year. So what we have here is the baseline for year 1. This is our 24 budget. This is the approved ed spending. These are our FY24 equalized pupils, the yield from the state, which gets us down to our tax rate here. So what we wanted to do was model out what the next 5 years could potentially look like on the tax rate with this impact of Act 127 in our change and equalized pupils. So you can see right off the bat, we're going from 2,484 pupils to 2,127 pupils. So go ahead.
And that's the number now. That's our model number.
Mhm.
But I think the AOE is going to give us what the exact number is soon.
Right. So I guess just some assumptions that I took in this model that, and this is in a non-PDF version, this is a very plug and play friendly model. So any of this can change. But what we did was just to make the numbers easy, we assumed a 5% increase in ed spending. So right off the bat in year 1, a 5% increase in ed spending, taking into account the change in equalized pupils, you can see the impact on the tax rate right here. And this is where the 5% cap comes into play. Any questions so far in year 1?
So I just want to be clear, there are 2 different 5% caps, right? The first 5% cap is into the tax rate that our taxpayers will see, right? Aren't they capped at 5%? And then the second is a cap in our spending in theory if it's not justified. Is that accurate? Am I explaining that accurately?
So the 5% cap does apply to the tax rate here. And I think, and John, feel free to interrupt. It looked like you wanted to say something, but what John was making a point of before was because of the increase in our ed spending per equalized pupil, the 22.62%, that automatically kicks us into the need to be part of this review committee that will determine if we are spending excessively or not excessively. So the 5% cap only applies to the bottom line tax rate. So I guess one important thing to model or to make note of is the change in the tax rate. So for 25, the change is based off of year over year. So you're effectively comparing FY25 tax rate with the new equalized pupils to the base of 24 at the old equalized number of equalized pupils. So that's why that change is so jarring right off the bat. Then when you get into years 26, 27, 28, and 29, you'll see that tax rate be more consistent because you're comparing to the year prior, and then you're comparing yourself against years where that new the new equalized pupil number has been consistent. So again, this number is driving a lot off of whatever our change in ed spending is. But I just thought for purposes of keeping it clear and clean across the board, and 5% really, I don't think is all that far off from what we saw for our change in ed spending in FY24 and so on. And so the reason I put together 3 different scenarios here is because the equalized pupil is a huge driver in the tax rate, but also so is the property yield. So in scenario 1, I kept the yield consistent. What you'll notice in scenarios 2 and 3, all other variables remain the same. I stuck with the same 5% increase in ed spending year over year, but I just wanted to model what the change would look like if the if the yield increased slightly or the yield decreased slightly. So scenario 2 is if we see a small increase to the yield, and then you can see, again, we're still seeing that large increase in the tax rate year 1 because it's being compared against FY24. But then when you start comparing, Act 127 years against Act 127 years, you see us falling below that 5% cap. The other side is if the yield decreases. Again, same thing in year 1, and then you see us utilizing that cap in the next 5 years. And unfortunately, we don't really know what's going to happen with the yield at this point. We will get, some preliminary information from Brad James and the state in December. But there's so much that goes into determining what that number will be. I just felt it was good to model out kind of all 3 scenarios so we can get an idea of what the bottom line impact is. Any questions so far? I know this is a lot, so.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be driven by our own ed spending, right?
Mhm.
And what the base yield amount is going to be. Is it going to go up or is it going to go down or stay the same? It went up pretty. It went up, more than we've seen over the past couple of years, but a lot of that was driven by, a surplus, and I don't know if there's a surplus in the ed fund right now or not.
Right.
So we'll have to wait and see. But this gives you, thank you, Nicole. You did a really good job, I feel, of just laying this out. Look, if the base yield stays the same and we have this increase in our ed spending, we're going to be capped for 5 years.
Mhm.
If there's a slight increase, then we might be able to get out from under the cap earlier. But if there's a decrease, we would be capped. For 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do you get a sense, Edie, about? Do you have any sense, Edie, about what they might do with that base yield amount, or nothing has come out yet?
No information yet.
Okay, thank you.
I would imagine in December I'll get some kind of an inkling, but that's about the time that you're going to get an inkling. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're going to go about our budget process like we have in the past, which is what do we need to support students?
Mhm.
Now wouldn't be the time probably to add anything that is not necessary. I guess, like maybe somebody would think a turf field is necessary, and that is a great thing, but that's probably not something that would fly right now.
Mhm.
So, and again, not picking on turf fields. I just, or a swimming pool. I like pools too. So, but so it's really just what do we need to meet the needs of students in the best way possible.
Mhm.
Okay. So the yield has to do with what's left over in the education budget, or is that? I just wanted to make sure I understand.
Mhm.
Well, no, I mean, there's some statutory parts to it. But a lot of it has to do too with how much all overall budgets are going up.
Okay.
and how much ed spending that the whole state is going to have to generate to meet those expenditures.
Okay.
And I think they take into account taxes that have been coming in and because, right, property tax is only a third of the education budget. The other 2/3 are sales and use tax. I think that comes into play also.
Yep, certainly did in the surplus was the revenue was higher than the state anticipated. I've heard it, just in the paper that it's lower, but I'm not in the inner workings at the state tax department.
Okay. All right. Should we review the development timeline?
Sure. You want me to present it, or you want to, Nicole?
I can if you'd like.
Sure, either.
Let's see.
You also have this link.
Yes.
Um,
So this is pretty much the same format that we've used the past couple of years. I believe John went through and updated the dates, so thank you for that. So tonight is meeting 1 where we're, discussing some preliminary goals and targets and discussing now what the development process and timeline will look like. John and I have already started scheduling our meetings with principals and directors starting in October to start looking at staffing and needs by those individuals. And then it looks like we have our first review of the draft starting in November. Starting to meet with community members in mid-November. Do we have a second? I didn't know if there's said second draft anywhere in here, but our board meeting for review and approval of the budget, it's in January. The informational meeting in February, and then town meeting day in March as normal. Any questions, concerns over the timeline, how it flowed last year?
One thing we've always said is we'll have additional meetings if we need to.
Mm-hmm.
So if we need a draft 3 or 4, then that's what we do. But we'll have we'll have some solid drafts for the committee, take feedback, and hopefully be ready to present to the board in December, and then go out and do their community engagement around the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Looks pretty straightforward to me. Do you think by early December is when we usually start to hear some stuff from the state?
Yeah, December 1 is there. We're supposed to have that letter on December 1.
Okay.
I just did some Googling while while Nicole was pulling that up. And right now, so as of the 11th of September, we are a little bit behind in our estimated revenue for the Ed Fund. Is that right? Yeah. But I think more or less on target, and it's due to flooding, due to just income. Folks didn't visit Vermont the way they would have otherwise, or folks hotels couldn't host folks, all of that. So that's all sales and use.
Right.
But close to on target.
Maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll get some good news.
So
That's helpful.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to look, go to the Joint Fiscal Office Vermont and Education Fund target tracking is where to get that information.
Writing that down. Thank you.
Thanks. So any comments about on the timeline? All right. So the 5-year forecast? Oh, I don't want to say. Was forecast the word we're using?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I muted? Oh.
No.
Yeah, that's the guidance that we got from the board.
Okay.
So that's the title we used.
Okay. I'll share this one. Okay. Let's get that on there. Okay. High level overview here. The categories that you're seeing on the side should be relatively similar to what you see during the budget review process. So I'll start by just speaking to some of the assumptions made in the forecast. Well, first of all, for year 25, anyways, that was made a little bit easier because we didn't have to make assumptions on teacher contracts agreements that were already in place. So that did help us in 25. We know what those numbers are, what those percentage increases are. So we did put in a 2% inflation factor largely around supplies or contracts for snow removal, grounds, wood chips, heating sources. We put a 10% increase in for health insurance because that's pretty consistently what we've been seeing. In fact, it was higher for this fiscal year that we're in now. And a 5% increase on our other insurances, general liability and property. For contracts beginning in FY26 and each year thereafter, we did 3.5% to 4%. We increased to $500,000 a year to capital plan. We've been pretty consistently doing $325,000 a year, so we upped that to $5. And then we added in what the potential for a bond would look like in fiscal year 27, specifically for HVAC and roofing. And we estimated a $20 million bond just for modeling. Any questions to start on the assumptions?
So on the capital, we're going to have to pay for at least 10% of the stormwater construction sites. And just to remind you, this is the law. We don't have a choice. We have to do it. So we added some additional money for that. We also have to do radon testing. We don't know, if they were going to have to do any mitigation around that. And what that will look like. So, and that's pretty costly. And then, there's different levels of PCBs where, 1, nothing, 2, a higher level that you need to mitigate, and 3, you got to shut down a whole area. So, we're trying to plan as effectively as we can for that. And we still do have our capital reserve fund.
I don't necessarily, unless anybody wants that, I was not planning to speak to or go through any of the individual line items specifically. I will talk quickly about the debt. I think, John and I had been talking about fiscal year 27 being when we would put the bond in. And as I was mapping out our debt schedule for the next couple of years, really a good chunk of our current debt is phasing out as we get to that fiscal year. So the timing is good, it seemed, to bring the bond in at that point. And then bottom line here, the year-to-year increase, that is, John had spoke at the beginning of the meeting, or when we were talking about targets, about, a 6% increase in expenditures. And he spoke to that the modeling shows that. And I think that's right on target with what we're showing here. And then of course, a bit of a jump in in FY28, because you have a 1 year, as I'm told by the bond bank, you have a 1 year deferment of principal payments. So our first principal payment wouldn't fall until fiscal year 28. That's why you see that bit of a jump there. But any questions on what you're seeing here? Any thoughts on additional assumptions to make, or questions on the assumptions we did make?
So we did it. We finally have at least a draft of a 5-year forecast.
It's very exciting. I have one, as I look at this, if there's a way to make fiscal year 27 and 28 a little more flat, rather than a decrease for 27 and an increase for 28 based on the previous year. And I think that I don't know how we could do that, but I think that perhaps if we put money into, I don't know, but I would think if there's a way to do that, that would be something that would be beneficial to the district. But I'm so excited to see this. This is it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think maybe you were alluding to, or I just made that assumption of whether it's, putting a little bit additional to the capital reserve in that year, or if we had any play on, the deferment of the full first year of principal, paying partial of that first year. We have options. I do think that that's a good point.
But I love that we can even think about it and have the conversation, because we can see the picture. So it's awesome. Thank you.
I think all of this is really great. The only thing I took away a little bit of a downer is when you gave the price for the bond, and what we get for that is HVAC and roofing. Gosh, what you'd really like to be able to say is we get a new building, and that's so not possible. And so even though there's good news here, I just kind of went ugh and slumped a bit. Because we keep hoping to get something new out of all this. But thank you.
I won't, HVAC and that facility side of things, I won't pretend to know the costs or understand the costs of all that, but I just know based on conversations with John and Phil that those are very, very costly systems.
Yeah, they are. And we did have a pretty wide assessment, so we have a good baseline. But everything's gone up 30-40%.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Nicole. Very good job. And I appreciate your attention to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see a bigger picture.
I'm going to stop sharing if there's not additional questions.
Okay. And next thing on the agenda is, can I get a motion to approve the monthly warrants for June, July, and August?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all those
Second.
in favor? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
that's unanimous. I think we're set. And then can I get a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second? Okay,
Can I second, even if I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't at the meeting?
sure.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes for 6/8/23? Was I the only one? Of
You
the four
might
of
have
us
been, but I don't understand why we can't say that we approve the minutes if we haven't been there. I've never understood that.
Okay. All right. So one approved and 3 abstentions. So I think that passes. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then looking at the budget development, our next meeting is it really Thursday, November 9th?
October 10th is the board. Oh wait, no, that's
Yeah,
board
there's
meeting.
2 board meetings in October, and then looks like Thursday, November 9th is the next finance committee meeting.
You're right.
Okay. All right.
So the question then is, do you need a meeting in October for warrants? Does it make sense to have that?
Yeah.
We can do it electronically too.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think that's it. Any other business?
No,
All right.
thanks a lot. That was a
Yeah.
lot tonight. I really appreciate all the feedback, and I'm also grateful that this feasibility study is on your radar, because I really didn't even know about it until a few weeks ago. So I'm glad that we were at least able to plant the seed with you folks so that we can watch this as it transpires.
Yep, I hear about it in my own home because of my husband being on the planning commission and affordable housing. So, but I'm still concerned.
I think we do have other business, John. Do we have it? We have dates for PCB testing.
Yeah, I wanted to know when that was happening.
Okay, yeah, let me so we're gonna, and also I'm gonna send something out to the full board too,
Yep.
in an email, but we just a minute, please.
I wrote down October.
Camels, Browns River is gonna have testing
12th and 13th of October.
yes. Let me check. I want to make sure. I want to confirm that. If I
Yep.
could. Yeah.
And Fran, go ahead.
Yeah. So tentatively, we're in that range, the 11th, I think, to the 13th, and Camel's Hump will be next in October and November, and then from there. We will have Brewster Pierce Middle School, Smiley, Underhill Center, Underhill ID, January and March 2024. And then MMU will be, the range is October to December 2024. So that would be in next school year. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, for UID here, because our neighbors were asking, that was January through March of 24. That's the range we have now.
Yep. So it's going to be between January and March of this, this school year. So there's a lot of unknowns to this, just to let you know. I told you about the 3 levels. And we're just going to have to work with the people from the state to if there are issues, to figure out how we're going to deal with them, because we don't have a Macy's in Jericho. So
That's the joke that everybody says.
yes, I took it from somebody else. I was at a meeting.
Yeah, I'm hearing it a lot.
I was actually the person from Bellows Falls. They shut their whole gym down. No gym. So hopefully, we will be okay, but it is definitely a concern of mine. but there's no real way to prepare because it's just unknown.
Mhm.
But I will definitely 100% and more be keeping the board completely in the loop of what's going on. That's what I know right now.
How long does it take for test results to come back?
I don't know that, Lisa. I've heard two different things. Some, quickly, and others it takes months.
Mhm.
We heard a little bit about it at the regional meeting.
Yeah, if you have the opportunity to watch the meeting, it's worth it to hear two different experiences in the state of how of what happened with them.
Exactly.
Hi, quick question. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this, but JES and RES weren't on the list of schools. Have they been tested?
Well, no, they
They're
most
new
of
and
your it's only schools that were built before 1980.
Thank you.
So more to come on this. Radon testing is also coming, and stormwater. Keeps us busy, right, Nicole?
Sure does.
I've really been changed. This stuff used to honestly stress me out a little because I don't like to spend money on things that aren't, supporting kids, students, but it is what it is. We got to do it. It's the law. I follow the law. I follow the rules. We do, but it is going to be some money.
Mhm.
Can I get any other comments or business or questions? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. All right. And you can vote by leaving. Thank you very much, guys.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.